You can't describe the smell. Not really. It's mud, mostly, but deeper than that. Old blood, rotten rations, rusting tin, and piss. It was the 17th of November, 1916. Our trench ran just north of Beaumont Hamel. The Battle of the Somme had been going on since July. It hadn't stopped, just slowed down. They said it was the war to end all wars. Funny thing to say when you're ankle-deep in muck and rats are chewing through your socks. I was 23, Private William Fletcher, 10th Royal Fusiliers. I hadn't seen London in nearly a year. I missed the stink of it. We'd been in the line for 5 days straight. Sleep was a joke. Socks stayed wet. Bread went moldy in half a day. But it's funny what you get used to. Like when Big Tommy Mullen found a dead German officer half frozen in the wall of the trench. Didn't flinch, just lit a smoke and said, "Poor bugger died waiting on breakfast." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was either that or scream. Before the khaki I was just Will Fletcher of Bethnal Green. Mum baked bread. Dad loaded crates on the docks. I had a sister named Maggie who could box my ears better than any sergeant. Life was simple. Scrape a few shillings, kick a ball through a back alley, and dodge the copper when the gas lamp went out. August 1914. I remember the day the war was announced. I was in a butcher's queue when I heard it. By the time I got home, Alfie Martin was already polishing his father's boots. "Come on, Will," he said, grinning. "Adventure, eh? Real soldier stuff." He had that look in his eyes, like it was a game, like the worst thing that could happen was running out of tobacco. We signed up 2 days later, Royal Fusiliers. They shaved our heads, handed us uniforms 3 sizes too big, and told us to learn how to kill. We trained in Aldershot. Cold food, cold nights, endless shouting. Our sergeant, Barnes, had one eye and a voice like gravel in a sack. But he knew his business. He'd fought in South Africa, said France would be over by Christmas. It wasn't. We shipped out early January 1915. Me, Alfie, Big Tommy, and about 100 lads from all over. Most of us had never seen the sea before. I wrote a letter to Mum before we boarded. Said I'd be back soon. Said not to worry. It's strange, the lies you tell to keep someone from crying. First stop was Ypres, April 1915. That's when we learned what gas smelled like. Chlorine, thick, green, and cruel. We didn't even have proper masks at first. November 1916. I was still in the mud. Different place, same rot. You learn to live with ghosts out here. Alfie walks with me sometimes, in the quiet hours. I can hear him, just over my shoulder. But it's not haunting. Not really. It's just memory. Heavy, but familiar. Tomorrow we go over the top again. They say it'll be our last push before winter. They always say that. I've stopped believing in endings. But I still have one photo in my pocket. Mum, Maggie and me in front of the bakery. I look at it every morning, just in case. I wrote to Mum again this morning. Candle, stub and torn ration box. That's all I needed. "Dearest Mum," I wrote, "it's cold, but I've got tea and a dry pair of socks. You'd be proud." That was a lie. The tea was gone, and my socks were wet through. But letters, they're not about the truth. They're about hope. Maggie used to write once a week. Always made sure to include some bit of gossip. Who was courting who Who got caught nicking tarts from the bakery? And Mum, she always worried, always ended with, "Come home safe, Will. Don't be foolish." As if I had any say in it. Mail was the only good part of trench life. Alfie used to pretend his girl sent him perfume. Turned out it was just bacon grease. One bloke from the East End got a photo of his newborn he didn't even know he had. We passed it around like treasure. In a place where you rot by inches, a letter makes you feel human. Our first real action came at Neuve-Chapelle, March 1915. We went over the top at dawn. My legs felt made of paper. I saw Big Tommy bayonet a man through the gut. He looked surprised, like someone had just spilled his pint. It lasted 3 days. We gained a few hundred yards, lost nearly 12,000 men. After the fight, we buried what we could. Others, we left. You stop seeing faces after a while. Helmets, uniforms, boots. But ghosts don't wear uniforms. They show up in your dreams. Sometimes Alfie's there. Sometimes Mum. Once, I swear, I saw my old schoolmaster wagging his cane. We found ways to laugh, though. One night, Corporal Briggs stood up in full kit and declared himself king of no man's land. He even made a crown out of sardine tins. For 5 minutes, the mud was everywhere, on our boots, in our rifles, under our bloody eyelids. It was July 30th, 1917. They called it the Ypres Salient. We called it the end of the world. Orders came at 0400. Stand to, prepare to advance. I remember checking my bayonet twice, once for rust, once for courage. Alfie was beside me, fingers trembling. Not fear, cold. We'd been soaking for hours. He looked at me and said, "Fletch, you reckon there's pubs in heaven?" I told him if there are, they'll be closed when we get there, just our luck. We laughed, that brittle laugh men give before they run into death. The whistle blew, and we climbed the ladder. The first step out was always the hardest, into the unknown, into no man's land. It was mud and wire and smoke, men falling around me like leaves in a storm. I ran until my legs burned. I fired my Lee Enfield blind, more out of habit than aim. I saw Alfie go down, chest shot, clean through. I dropped beside him, tried to drag him back, but the mud gripped us both. He looked at me, bloody bubbles on his lips. "Tell Mum," he said. That was it. I told him, "I will," even though I knew I'd never find her. We didn't make it far, maybe 50 yards. We huddled in a shell crater, 4 of us. One bled out before noon. The sun came up like fire, but we didn't feel it. By nightfall we crawled back to our line, what was left of it. They said the attack was a success. We gained 100 yards. But Alfie didn't gain anything. They rolled his body into a canvas bag and tagged him with a number. Just a number. I buried him myself. Didn't tell anyone. Took his identity disc and stuffed it in my boot. He deserved more than a number. He deserved to be remembered. They never told us why we were here. They said it was for king and country, for duty, for honor. But in that crater, watching my best mate die, I didn't see a king. I saw a boy who liked marmalade and hated poetry, and I wondered if Maggie would still know who I was, if I ever got home. They called it Polygon Wood, a mess of shattered trees and churned-up roots near Zonnebeck. The mist rolled in thick that morning, September 26th. You could hardly see your own rifle. Orders came through in fragments. Advance. dig in, hold until relieved. I'd heard that last one before. It never came when it was supposed to. It happened fast. A machine gun opened up from a copse we thought was empty. Men dropped, screaming. We hit the dirt, about 15 of us. When the smoke cleared, we weren't with the rest of the battalion anymore. We were alone. We dug in under a collapsed pillbox. Took turns watching the tree line, ate moldy biscuits, and drank rainwater from our helmets. The corporal was a Scottish bloke named Fraser, voice like gravel. "No panic, lads," he said. "We hold. That's what we do." By the third night, only 8 of us were left. I started seeing things. Alfie, standing by the tree line. My mother, waving her apron. Hunger makes you hollow. Sleep makes you soft. I wasn't sure what was real anymore. Only the mud. That was always real. Fraser sent me and a lad named Jenkins to scout west. Just past the wood line, Jenkins tripped a wire. The flare lit up everything, and then the bullets came. I dragged him back. He bled out halfway, just kept mumbling about fish and chips. "Tell my sister I didn't cry," he said. He didn't. We heard them before we saw them, Welsh lads from the 19th Division. I wanted to cheer, but I just sat there. I don't think I believed we were alive. They treated us like heroes, said we'd held the line. I didn't feel like a hero. Jenkins was dead. Fraser had lost both legs. The rest of us had names that felt borrowed. We were the lost company, but they gave us medals instead of directions home. I wrote to Maggie again. "Dear Mags," I said, "tell the baby I'll teach them how to fish one day. I'll be home soon." I didn't even know if she was still waiting, but hope's a kind of weapon too. By December we were sent south, the Somme sector again. The ground was hard as slate, and the frost clung to every bolt and buckle. The guns had quieted some, but it wasn't peace, just waiting. They called it the Great Silence. I thought of it more like the breath before drowning. We hardly spoke anymore, not unless we had to. Men looked older, eyes like glass marbles. One lad, Peter from Leeds, read the same letter from home every day. It had dried mud on the corner and smelled of lavender. Then one day he just sat down and wouldn't get up. Didn't say a word for 3 days. There was a moment I still hear sometimes in dreams. A whistle, a shell. The sound so loud it felt like your lungs got kicked in. It never landed. We waited for it to hit for what felt like forever. Fraser, back with us now, one leg gone and walking on a crutch, whispered, "Maybe it's still coming." Christmas came. Someone tried to roast a rat like it was tradition. I carved a small wooden horse for Fraser's daughter, never met her, just knew her name. We passed around a bottle of something strong, tasted like petrol and regret. Alfie should have been there, Jenkins too. We raised a toast anyway. I caught Fraser in the dugout later that night, just staring. He was gripping that photo of his daughter so hard, his fingers turned white. He said, "What if she don't remember me, Fletch? What if I'm nothing but a hole in her story?" I didn't have an answer, so I sat with him. Sometimes that's all you can do. Word came down that January, no leave. Too many men needed at the line. I hadn't been home since 15. I didn't even know if Maggie and the baby had gotten my last letter. Still, I folded the paper, wrote another, and gave it to the chaplain, just in case. One morning in February, the fog lifted early. We could see the German line clear as glass. And then, God help me, we heard music, some Hun playing an accordion. Fraser started humming along, said it was a tune his mum used to sing. For 5 whole minutes, we weren't soldiers, we were boys again. Then came orders, prepare for major enemy action in spring. Intelligence said the Germans were planning something big, something final. We sharpened bayonets, counted bullets, dug deeper trenches, and we waited for the silence to end. March 21st, 1918. They called it Operation Michael. We didn't have a name for it yet. It was just before 5 in the morning, when the sky lit up like hell's own sun. 1,000 guns, that's what they said afterward. I stopped counting after the first shell landed on our wire. It didn't stop. Not for minutes, not for hours. Gas shells, high explosive, shrapnel rounds. It was as if the whole world cracked open. I remember shouting, but no one could hear me, not even myself. Fraser scribbled a note to me in the dark. "Is this it?" I wrote back, "Feels like it." By midday the wire was gone. The front-line trenches were dust. They came through in waves, stormtroopers fast and low, masks on, bayonets fixed. We fell back to the support trench, then again. I saw men I'd known since the Somme buried by the blast. We fought for every yard, but it was like holding the tide with a teacup. We retreated over 3 days, from St. Quentin to Ham, from Ham to Peronne. I didn't sleep, barely ate. At one point, I sat in a ditch beside Fraser, our boots soaked through. He said, "If this is victory, I want no part of it." I didn't know what side he was talking about anymore. We were ordered to hold a ridge near Rosières. No reinforcements, no artillery, just us. 1 Lewis gun, 2 boxes of ammunition, and a field telephone that didn't work. We held for 9 hours. When we were finally relieved by French chasseurs, I had 3 rounds left in my magazine. I don't remember what I said. I think I just laughed. They pulled us back to regroup near Amiens. The village was half burned and smelled of wet ash. Some French children offered us a loaf of bread. Fraser gave them his last tin of peaches. We slept in a barn with holes in the roof. I watched the stars through the beams. I remember thinking, if I die tonight, I hope I dream of home. The Huns came again on April 5th, one last push toward Amiens. We were ready this time. New boys from London held the right flank. One of them still had a school crest stitched under his kit. They held. We all did. By nightfall, they'd spent themselves. Operation Michael had bled out. We looked out over the fields, smoke hanging like torn cloth. They said we'd won, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving. We'd lost half the company. The mud, the blood, the silence. It clung to us. Still, something had shifted. I could feel it in the way the officers stood, the way the enemy withdrew. August 8th, 1918, Amiens. They called it the Black Day of the German army. For once, we had the element of surprise. Infantry, tanks, cavalry, even planes overhead. When the barrage started, we were already moving. No waiting, no crawling, just forward. It was the first time I'd ever fought alongside tanks, big, clumsy beasts that sounded like steel coffins full of coughing men. But they rolled right through barbed wire like it was paper. We followed their tracks into the German line, bayonets fixed, hearts pounding. By the 3rd day, they were running. Germans left gear behind, hands up, shouting, "Kamerad! Kamerad!" It felt strange, chasing instead of being chased. We advanced 5 miles in a day. We hadn't moved that fast since 1914. They sent new boys to replace the fallen, barely shaved, full of jokes and stories from London or Derbyshire or God knows where. One lad asked me if it was true that we used rats for target practice. I told him, "Only the smart ones." He laughed. I didn't. Late September. We came to the Canal du Nord. The bridge was gone. Germans had blown it to pieces. We crossed under fire, planks shaking under our feet. Fraser took a bullet in the shoulder, said it felt like being punched by a horse. He laughed, then passed out. October 9th, we walked into Cambrai. Liberated, they said. Children waved flags. A woman kissed my cheek and gave me bread and onions. I hadn't eaten anything, not out of a tin, in weeks. We sat in a church with no roof and lit candles for the ones who hadn't made it. By late October, everything hurt. The Germans were retreating, but they made us pay for every yard. Mines, snipers, booby traps in barns. And the cold came early, wet, heavy. We kept moving, because to stop was to think. Word spread. They were breaking. Austria was done. Turkey surrendered. Our officers stopped yelling so much. We started hearing the word armistice. I didn't believe it. You don't survive all that blood to be let go by a word. The guns stopped at 11. Not just paused, stopped. I stood in the mud, rifle still in my hands, and waited for the next shell. It never came. Fraser limped up beside me and said, "So, what now?" I didn't know. I still don't. I wrote to Maggie that night, told her it was over, that I'd be coming home, that I missed the way she said my name. I asked her to forgive me for the silence, for the dirt I'd bring back with me, for not being the same man she'd sent off.
They put us on a train in Calais. Not one of us had a proper uniform. Some wore trench coats patched with wire, others still had mud on their boots. Nobody sang, nobody cheered. We just stared out the windows, like prisoners let loose too late. I arrived in Surrey on a grey afternoon. The hedgerows were green again. The air smelled of smoke and earth, but not cordite. Maggie stood at the gate. She didn't run, didn't cry, just opened the door and said, "You're late." I laughed for the first time in months. That first dinner was quiet. I kept expecting someone to shout over the table. Fraser, probably, but it was just Maggie and me, and the space in between. She asked me nothing. I told her everything I could without words. Some things stayed on the Somme. I took work as a postman. Funny, isn't it? Years surrounded by death, and now I bring messages again. A boy once asked me why I walked with a limp. I said I'd dropped my shovel. He didn't understand, but I think I did. In 1920 I visited the graves in France. The white crosses stretched for miles. I found Fraser's name etched in stone, placed a tin of peaches beside it, said something stupid, then stood in silence. The kind of silence only war teaches. Sometimes at night I still hear it. The barrage, the rats, the singing. I see men walking ahead of me, rifles slung, backs bent. They look back, they wait. I don't know what I owe them, only that I do, that I carry them with me, every step, every day. My name is William Fletcher. I fought in the war they said would end all wars. I came home, some of me anyway. And if you're hearing this, maybe you'll understand something the rest of the world forgot.
that no one really comes back from a war. Not completely, but sometimes, just sometimes, we find a way forward.